You know, loneliness is on the rise, and the pandemic has only made the situation worse. Despite living in the most connected time in human history, it's astonishing to discover that an unprecedented number of us feel isolated. According to the UK's Office of National Statistics, it's affecting all age groups. But for the over 50s, experiencing loneliness is set to reach 2 million by 2026, and that is a 49% increase over the last decade. 500,000 older people go at least 5 or 6 days a week without seeing or speaking to anyone. The ONS also reported that women feel lonely more frequently than men, and unlike men, they're much less likely to say that they've never felt lonely. So if you feel like you're drowning in loneliness and you don't know how to shake it off, keep watching. Hi, Lesley Hornsby here. If you've seen me before, you know I coach and help people to change and build the lives that they truly want and realise goals and ambitions and be happier in themselves. And together we achieve some amazing results, all with the help of NLP. If you'd like to know more, then just make sure you click that subscribe button to get these videos regularly. You know, loneliness can be triggered by all kinds of life events, from reaching midlife, maybe children leaving home, finding yourself divorced, or maybe just you and your partner don't seem to share common interests anymore. Or maybe it's just simply that you've moved away from family and friends. And today, I'm going to talk through what can happen psychologically when living with a chronic loneliness and how to combat it with help of some amazing NLP techniques that are designed to change the negative mindset and behaviours that you can develop. And I'll also offer you some practical advice on ways to combat loneliness and begin to reclaim your life. So understanding your feelings and their origin is the first step to making a change. Once you've got a handle on that, then you're in a much better place to start taking action. Just as with other biological drives, loneliness is often symptomatic that something's missing in your life, that you need to pay attention, and in this case, your need for other people. Chronic loneliness can give rise to anxiety, which in a worst case scenario, if it persists, could lead to any number of health implications, including increased risk of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and mental health problems. When loneliness develops into a strong presence in your life, it often begins with initial feelings of isolation, which in turn generates a buildup of tension and despondency. Your mind can become fixated on the negatives in your interactions with those around you, and without necessarily even being aware of it, your whole mindset begins to shift into a pattern of pessimism about yourself and other people. This can often lead to a behaviour change. You start avoiding social interactions, which ultimately just magnifies your feelings of isolation. The longer it goes on, the more severe the cycle of negativity grows, and the harder it becomes to resist your self-destructive behaviour. Before you know it, you've deliberately separated yourself from others, ignoring phone calls from friends, and turning down invitations to socialise. Now, there are obviously times when having some alone time is really great, and many people, particularly those of us who are a bit more introverted, enjoy being alone, because it can be a time to regroup, reflect, and think things through, or just maybe take a break. However, the fact is that loneliness is an entirely subjective and individual experience. The common misconception is that loneliness is something that happens only to people who maybe lack social skills or perhaps are awkward around people that they don't know. However, based on stats like those reported by the ONS, it's very evident that good social skills have little or no impact on the social connections that adults form, and so the truth is everyone can potentially experience loneliness. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are, how attractive, powerful, famous, if you have a killer personality, all of us potentially fall victim to feelings of loneliness sometimes. Because frankly, it's part of our biology, like hunger or thirst. Human beings are driven to seek each other out, a behaviour that many psychologists identify as a throwback to our primal past, when being part of a community was necessary for survival. Natural selection rewarded those of our ancestors who chose to collaborate and seek protection in numbers. Now, I know it might not feel like it right now, but you absolutely have the power within you to change things. What we'll discover in the next 10 minutes or so is that some of the things that you can try, firstly to change your mindset, and then the practical things that you can explore to keep loneliness at bay. Of course, being alone doesn't necessarily mean that you're lonely. On the other hand, you could be surrounded by friends and family and still feel incredibly alone. I know this because I've experienced it firsthand. There have been many times in my life when I've been so bone achingly lonely that I just find it difficult to breathe sometimes. Now, I'm sure a lot of coaches wouldn't like to admit something like that, but you know what? Having personal insight into how my clients might be feeling, I believe can only make me a better coach. And from their perspective, knowing I have personal experience of their emotional state, well, that can be very, very reassuring to many people. So, you know what? I'm happy to admit my own flaws and difficulties. If you are feeling lonely, then it's pretty important to firstly acknowledge that loneliness is a natural part of the human condition. You definitely shouldn't dismiss it or think somehow that you have to tough it out. Apart from anything else, there's no shame in admitting to feeling lonely. And if the stats show us anything, it's that feeling lonely is universally understood. When you become locked into a state of loneliness, the process of self-isolation, of being closed off, the psychological boundary that you create around yourself, it begins to expand. In NLP terms, your boundary forms part of your self-concept, and that's a term that's used by psychologists to refer to how you think about, evaluate and perceive yourself, and it can influence your thinking, how you feel about things, motivation, your performance, how you learn and behave. Now, your boundary is part of a self-preservation mechanism. Our neurology, when it comes to emotional pain, behaves exactly the same way as the threat of physical pain. We basically avoid it. Our boundary then protects us and helps us to mentally distance ourselves from those that we regard as a threat or perhaps damaging to us in some way. In normal circumstances, this might be, for example, a person who is a bit critical or unfriendly. However, what chronic loneliness can do is insidiously move that boundary outward, so you begin to feel psychologically distanced from people indiscriminately, whether they're good or bad. This distortion then leads you to feel, well, a disconnect, and it's tied to the psychological boundary that you're creating around yourself. So the question is, how do you combat that? Now, obviously, we are talking about an imaginary boundary rather than a physical one. So you firstly need to take some time to reflect on your behaviour in terms of your relationship with people in your life. So first then, you need to measure where your boundary is. To help you visualise this, you could try imagining a person, say someone you don't know, not necessarily threatening or sinister, just someone who's unknown to you. And now you're going to picture them moving closer towards you. Allow them to keep coming until they reach a point where any closer would feel too close. You can use this exercise and it will help you to get a sense of where your boundary limit currently is. Having elicited your boundary in terms of its size, working with the NLP self-concept model, you now focus on the times in your life when you were very connected to one or more people, those with whom maybe you had a great rapport. As you move back into that moment, remember what it was like. Does that image have a shape? And what about the colour? Do you associate the memory with a sound or a temperature? Try playing around with these elements of the memory and note whether it changes how you feel and remember it. Now, consider what it's like inside and outside that boundary. Try again applying your senses and explore colour, temperature, intensity, whatever feels appropriate to you. You could try flexing your boundary limit, make it bigger or smaller, and again, see if that feels different. Ask yourself, what would happen if I were to let that boundary drop or extend it to include people that I'd like to connect with, but you haven't so far allowed yourself to? In mastering the sense of your boundary, you're then able to consciously choose to include people inside it rather than just being a defensive reflex. What people often experience is that by testing their boundary in this way, they come to feel safer about letting others in and find with those that they do let in that there's an immediate sense of connection and well-being. Once you're familiar with visualizing your boundary, you can try working with another NLP process called mapping across. In basic terms, this is a technique used in NLP to encourage a change from a negative state to a positive state. Using submodalities, which is your senses like touch and sight, etc., you can use mapping across to transition from one internal state to another. For example, in this case, moving from an unresourceful state of being insular and guarded with those around you to a more resourceful state of acceptance and inclusion. To do this, take some time to visualize your boundary and then think about the times when you felt really connected with people and other times when you felt really disconnected from them. Start with the memory when you felt disconnected. Allow yourself to be fully associated with that memory and note where your boundaries are located. The chances are that those disconnected from you are situated outside it. Then in the same way, think about the memories when you felt very connected to people. Choose a memory, if you have one, where it's as if you were one with them. Now relate that to your boundary. Were they inside? Now you're likely going to find that those people that we allow in, we often feel quite closely connected to. And the benefit of working with your self-concept in this way is that as your self-awareness and knowledge develops, you begin to get back control. The choice of whether to drop your boundary is restored, and feelings of loneliness and disconnection will begin to diminish. Let's talk then now about some practical tactics that you can try in combating loneliness. Often when struggling with loneliness, you can find that your low esteem just hits a pretty low ebb. And if you would like some advice on how to boost that and your confidence, I've added a link below to another of my videos that deals with that subject. Something else you can try is to practice mindfulness. You can try focusing on the present moment. Practice celebrating the good things in your life. I've lived in my house now for, nearly 5 years, but you know what? Still get a little thrill of pleasure every time I think about it, because at one time in my life, I was convinced that I would never have my own home again after I went through a difficult divorce, which basically knocked me off the property ladder. It might sound facile, but counting your blessings regularly truly can help you develop a positive mindset and keep things in perspective for you. When you do feel good about something, try sharing it with others. And yes, you can post on your social media, but I'm talking about reaching out to family and friends directly. The positive things that happen in your life, even the smallest win is valuable. For most of us, life is not just a series of major events, but it's made up of small moments, which nevertheless can be just as significant. Something as simple as waking up and feeling good because the sun is shining is something to savour and enjoy. So take time to consciously acknowledge it. If you enjoy helping people, then maybe volunteering might work for you. Doing something that aligns with your values is a sure way to boost your feelings of contentment and happiness. The most obvious defence, of course, against loneliness is, of course, socialising. Yeah, I know for some it's easier said than done, right? What I can say is that post-pandemic, there are literally hundreds of groups and clubs and societies all over the internet, catering for every location, taste, talent and hobby. I've added links to just a few below this video. I myself found my social life blossom and just take off by joining a few groups that shared some of my interests, and in most cases it doesn't even cost you anything. It might seem daunting to join a new group where you don't know anyone, but actually you'll find practically everyone you meet's been going through the same thing as you. Whether you're looking for a partner, want to find people to go on city breaks with, resurrect a hobby, whatever it is, make sure it's something that gets you excited and really fires your interest. You'll also find walking into a room full of strangers does get easier the more you do it, and I'm talking from first-hand experience here too. Flexing your interpersonal skills works just like exercising a muscle in your body. The more you do it, the stronger it gets. And there are also, by the way, countless videos that you can watch and articles on the art of conversation if you want a few tips to get you started. If you need to boost your confidence to help you take some action, try writing down positive affirmations. Maybe 3 things that you like about yourself or 3 things that you're good at. The benefit of writing these things down is that whenever you do need to raise your confidence, reading the positive things you wrote will help you shift your perspective and that state of mind to something more positive on those occasions when you're going to need it most. Finally, talking about your thoughts and feelings, opening up, although a difficult process, can go a long way to helping you make a change. And it does get easier with time. Consulting a coach or a counsellor won't necessarily give you all the answers, but it can certainly help you gain clarity and figure out what it is you need, what areas you might benefit from working on. From my perspective, the goal of any life coach is always to help you work through issues, uncover what may be affecting your emotional well-being so that you can feel happier and more connected and more fulfilled. What you shouldn't do is just accept the status quo. You really want to, you can change your situation and how you think, and you can banish loneliness for good. It's been great to speak to you again. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell to be notified of new videos. and to learn more about working with NLP, life coaching, and living your best life. If you do think you'd like to try life coaching, I've added a link below where you can go and make an appointment to have an informal chat with me, and it's obligation free. In the meantime, I hope you can join me again next time. But for now, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you soon.